Good afternoon. Yes, that's good. Thank you, Amelia. So today, well, my name is Lakeshia Anderson. I actually work for the Bahamas National Trust in our Grand Bahama office as the parks manager. However, today I'll be wearing my parks planner hat, talking to you about a 2-year project funded by the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund, in which we partnered with the San Salvador Living Jewels Foundation as well as the Gerace Research Centre. So my talk is going to give you some background on some past efforts to establish the park on the island of San Salvador. I'll give you a brief background on what planning for national parks really entails. And then I'm going to talk about the biological values of the sites proposed for San Salvador, give you some objectives, methods, and some of the results that we gathered from that particular project, and then some future steps. So as early as 1983, sentiments were expressed to protect critical habitats on the island of San Salvador as part of a proposal submitted to government identifying 52 sites to be designated as national parks under the management of the Bahamas National Trust. In 2000, the Iguana Specialist Group of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature held a workshop in San Salvador producing a priority list consisting of 26 sites that were of importance for seabird and iguana conservation. In 2005, a local grassroots organization was founded, the San Salvador Living Jewels. Later on that year, the planning process for the 5 proposed national parks were actually initiated, and following the submission of a park proposal to government in 2007. So when we started to talk about planning for new protected areas, there are 2 key components that are of utmost importance. Gone are the days when we can sit down with our colleagues with a map, drawing lines, without first consulting with those who would be impacted by national park designations. And so we wanted to make sure that when we start to look at designing new protected areas, the scientific assessments are very important. Luckily for us, our location was in San Salvador, and so we really had the opportunity to work along with the Gerace Research Centre. So in terms of stakeholder engagement, it's important that we target all decision makers who will be impacted by the establishment of a new national park. So San Salvador, we've talked about Exuma. I'm bringing you back to San Salvador. Extensive data was collected, like I said, by the GRC. So the data was available and accessible. So for San Salvador, located right there in the little circle, it's a very small island. It's one of the easternmost islands in the Bahamas. It's small. It's about 11 by 21 kilometers, with a population of just under 1,000 people. There we go. So why did we end up receiving the funds for this 2-year project? Particularly for the Grams Harbour site at the north and for the Southern Great Lakes, considering it was an island home to endemics and important nesting areas for seabirds. So why these particular sites? So on San Salvador, the prominent features for these particular sites would be these ones. The critically endangered San Salvador rock iguana, which is endemic to San Salvador. At present, less than 600 iguanas is likely to remain on the isolated keys surrounding the island. The second key feature of the San Salvador National Park System is that they host the largest diversity of breeding seabirds in the Bahamas. Remarkably, San Salvador hosts 14 of the 17 species of seabirds that breed in the Bahamas. So that's 82% of all seabirds that nest in the Bahamas actually nest on San Salvador. Another prominent feature are breathtaking wall diving that attracts repeat divers. The island does have shallow reefs and breathtaking wall dives. The photo you would see there is myself and my colleague going through one of the tunnels that leads over to the coral wall. These scuba diving sites were actually first discovered in the early 70s, where visibility ranges from 100 to 150 feet. So another prominent feature would be the shallow reefs, particularly this colony of elkhorn coral, which is the first coral to be listed as endangered, the Acropora palmata, where numerous reef locations actually you would find these colonies around the island. And so the CEPF project that I mentioned earlier falls within the region of the Caribbean islands under Strategic Direction 1, talking about improving protection and management of 45 priority key biodiversity areas. And in the Bahamas, 2 of those were found on San Salvador. Looking at long-term impacts, we wanted to make sure that the KBAs are recognized both locally, nationally, and on the global scale, contributing to national and global conservation goals, international obligations, as well as local economic development, while also still maintaining the distinct and unique ecological attributes found on the island of San Salvador. So a number of education and outreach initiatives were designed to engage various stakeholder groups for the planning process. First, we collected baseline awareness surveys with one-on-one interviews with local residents to feed into an outreach strategy that would re-engage local stakeholders after that long break period after the initial proposal was developed and submitted, but was not approved by government. And so I know a lot of you may probably wonder, well, all of this work, all of these prominent features, but why weren't the parks established back in 2007? So in our method, we also wanted to make sure that any previous impediments that hindered the progress were eliminated, one being speaking with private landowners and extracting those particular boundaries that incorporated private lands. So our strategy focused on engaging both local stakeholders as well as those on the national levels, because we wanted to make sure to target senior government officials who made the final decisions on park approvals. So at the local level, we conducted about 12 school visits, teaching the students about the importance of the areas proposed in San Salvador, as well as the marine and terrestrial life that they would protect. So on the top photo, you would see one of our education officers highlighting one of the posters and really talking about why each area was important, as well as we also strategically developed presentations that catered to the 2 species that we wanted to focus on, so the seabirds and the iguanas. We had our Scott Johnson at the bottom photo giving a presentation to the high school students, on why birds matter. We also conducted a number of site visits and field trips, not only with the students, but also with local community groups, so they can have that firsthand experience on why these areas should be protected. We held a number of community meetings. We also held focus group meetings. And we also wanted to make sure not to just talk about the proposed protected areas, but also talking about future management prescriptions. So we wanted to understand how each group interacted with each particular area, were there any conflicts amongst the users, and how they would like to see collaboration amongst the groups in terms of management of these park systems. We produced a number of outreach materials based on the science that was provided, so putting together posters and banners highlighting the prominent features within those 5 particular areas. For engaging our government officials, we conducted quite a number of formal meetings with senior government officials. Luckily for us, the member of parliament for San Salvador is the deputy prime minister of the country, and so that made our work a little bit easier. We did provide a number of updates regularly to the member of parliament. We produced a number of newspaper articles highlighting not just the prominent features of the project, but also all the biological data of the particular sites. We produced television public service announcements, radio PSAs as well, and we collected more than 2,000 signatures from both local, national, and international supporters. From the data gathered from the scientific work, from the local stakeholder groups, as well as the petitions, a park proposal was submitted to government in April of 2014, along with a technical brief, as well as a follow-up meeting with the Prime Minister to present the actual proposal. So what came out of all of these efforts after this 2-year period? Well, on April of last year, the Deputy Prime Minister, along with the Minister of the Environment, announced the designation of 5 new national parks. What was the most prideful thing, I think, for me for that day was not just the amount of people, was the amount of people that gathered. They didn't gather just for the food. They didn't gather just for the drinks. They didn't gather just for the music, but it was a really proud moment that the local people of San Salvador were really proud to finally see their dream come a reality. Many thanks should be given to this group of people here. They were full of excitement. They were really happy. They were really proud. This is the group of the members from the San Salvador Living Jewels who really did a tremendous job in making sure that despite the delays, that things still were able to get done. So what do these areas look like? Collectively, these areas cover about 20,000 acres. The map on the screen now is what's now the Grams Harbour, Iguana, and Seabird National Park, which does have the largest population of the San Salvador rock iguana, the largest and more variety of seabirds, including nesting colonies of those seabirds, coral reefs, extensive seagrass beds, the southern Great Lake, which also hosts populations of the iguanas and nesting seabirds. We also have Pigeon Creek and Snow Bay National Park, which is actually the only tidal creek on the island of San Salvador, so essentially accounting for the only nursery area for the island. And we also have the West Coast Marine Park, which incorporates all of the dive sites found south of the airport. Grays Bay National Park is actually the smallest. It's located on the eastern portion of the island. And all sites, like I said, collectively cover about 20,000 acres. Other key project results, it paved the way for the announcement of an additional areas that were incorporated in the expansion of the National Protected Area System, where international goals were met under the Convention of Biological Diversity's Program of Work on Protected Areas, where 10% of nearshore marine habitats are now protected, which makes us now halfway to our 20% goal by 2020 under the Caribbean Challenge Initiative. So these areas also help to improve our national conservation goals, particularly under the terrestrial and marine habitats, as well as it afforded the opportunity to draft a management plan that did include quite a number of consultations and input from the local community. One of the biggest outputs of this project as well was the signing of a memorandum of understanding between the Bahamas National Trust and the local organization, the San Salvador Living Jewels, which would facilitate management of the island's park system. So for future steps, we want to make sure that now that the parks are established, we look at establishing a park administration in conjunction with the local organization there. We want to make sure we finalize a management plan as well as implement it, which will have components for zoning. So we do have the Pigeon Creek National Park that has been agreed with the communities to be a no-take area. However, other areas will be looked at multiple zoning possibilities. A sustainable funding for the park to help with maintenance and to promote programs will be a partnership with the Living Jewels under a dive-type program that they implemented back in 2012, which looks at a sustainable funding mechanism to support the parks. And we also want to make sure that the locals also benefit, considering they do have repeat visitors, to provide them with an opportunity for ecotourism. So looking at certifications and training courses for bird tourism, which would also assist with long-term monitoring of species of importance. So there's so many people that should be thanked, to be acknowledged, but I wanted to really highlight Sandy Vogelai, who couldn't be here with us today, Dr. Thomas Rothfuss, who was the former director of the Gerace Research Centre, Dr. William Hayes, Susan DePredenza, Melanie, who was here, the people of San Salvador, and a whole list of other organizations and entities. I have time for one question. Thank you.